Hello and welcome to the fourth workshop in the series on course design, this one entitled Assessing Student Learning. This short presentation will help you to define the assessment of student learning, classify the various assessment strategies and tools, and align your designing of assessment tasks with your course-intended learning outcomes. But before we begin to discuss assessment, let us simply recap the message of the previous lessons, and that is about the importance of the alignment principle. The alignment principle is that principle wherein all the elements of the course, teaching content, the instructional materials, the text, the teaching and learning activities, and assessment are oriented towards the course-intended learning outcomes, and consequently with each other. By following these two principles, setting the learning outcomes as the course objective, and then aligning all the major components around the course-intended learning outcomes, a balanced, aligned course will result. Today's workshop will deal with assessment. The term assessment is very broad. It can refer to anything from the assessment of the course, assessment of a program, student assessment in a general sense, assessment of learning, assessment for learning. In this workshop, we shall be focusing on assessment of learning and assessment for learning. Let us begin with a definition. Assessment is the process of gathering and discussing information from multiple sources in order to develop a deep understanding of what students know, understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of their educational experiences. The process culminates when assessment results are used to improve subsequent learning. Please note three elements of this definition. A, it works at the course level. B, the purpose of assessment is twofold, formative and summative. We shall return to this shortly. And C, the ultimate goal is to enhance student learning. Formative assessment and summative assessment, this distinction was just mentioned. These are two various ways in which assessment works. Formative assessment refers to a wide variety of methods that teachers use to conduct in-process evaluations of student comprehension, learning needs, and academic progress during the course. Formative assessment helps teachers identify concepts that students are struggling to understand, skills they're having difficulty acquiring, or learning standards they have not yet achieved, so that adjustments can be made to the lessons, instructional techniques, and academic support. Summative assessment, on the other hand, refers to a wide variety of methods that teachers use to measure learning progress and achievement at the conclusion of an instructional period. Formative assessment is therefore assessment for the purpose of learning, whereas summative assessment is assessment of learning. This table unpacks the distinction between formative and summative assessment further. For example, the frequency of assessment varies. Formative assessment happens often during the course of instruction. Summative assessment is rarer and happens at the end of the unit or semester at a logical conclusion of the material. The grading is very different. In formative assessment, the stakes are low. It does not count greatly towards the final grade, and indeed, it can be optional. Summative assessment is, of necessity, high stakes. But of course, this difference is reflected in the purpose. Whereas for formative assessment, the opportunity to improve student learning is very high. Whereas formative assessment, since it's done at the completion, the opportunity for the students to improve is very low. Thus, the purpose and the means of assessment are very different. But in a well-designed course, these two work together. Now, you will recall from a previous lesson on designing learning outcomes, Bloom's taxonomy, a pyramid, moving from very basic, low-level student learning, such as remembering, to higher-level student learning, such as creating. Well, the chart in front of you now is using Bloom's taxonomy, although it has inverted it, where the very top row has the low-level learning objectives, and the bottom has the higher-level learning objectives. You'll see the left-hand column has the learning objective type, and the right-hand has the appropriate assessment techniques. So, for example, recalling or remembering a very basic low-level student learning activity has, as an appropriate assessment technique, objective tests, such as fill-in-the-blank, matching, multiple choice questions, etc. Whereas, to skip to the extreme bottom, those learning objectives that involve generation or creation or designing have correspondingly more complex assessment activities. The alignment principle needs to be mentioned again, for it is not only the basis of course design, it is also the source of great student dissatisfaction. Assessments must be integrated and aligned with the learning experiences and the course objectives. If this is not done, students will complain that the assessment was unfair or not valid, since it did not reflect what they did in class or what was the student learning objective described in the syllabus. It is therefore important that when designing assessment activities, the instructor maps out the level and of the activity and how much it's weighed. So the chart in front of you now simply is a way of schematizing the various assessment activities, whether they're very low level in the sense of Bloom's taxonomy or high level, and then how much these activities will be weighed in determining the student's final grade. So in summary, assessment should be integrated into and aligned with the learning experiences, stated objectives, outcomes of a course. Where possible, assessment should be multifaceted and timely. Student achievement should be assessed in a formative manner during a course and a summative manner both during and at the end of a course. General assessment methods and grading standards must be communicated clearly to students at the beginning of the course, and clear and transparent assessment criteria should be provided to students throughout the course. These summary principles are from the U of A assessment and grading policy, and it is important to note that the alignment principle in course design addresses these principles directly. Your assignment is to develop an assessment plan based on the outcomes that you have identified in your chart and using a test blueprint. Keep in mind the following questions. Are my assessment tasks congruent with my learning outcomes? Am I weighing assessment tasks in a way that reflects the relative importance of the outcome in relation to my goals for the course? And here is the blueprint that you shall fill in. This concludes our brief workshop on assessing student learning. Next time, we shall be taking the various elements of the previous workshop